policies are also rules. And the argument is that if you want to make a transition from low productivity to high productivity, you must have what has been described earlier as good governance rules. You must have stable property rights, you must have a good rule of law, you must have an accountable politics. Then investors will come in and invest in your organizations, they will raise their productivity, and you are off into development, right? In other words, the normal way of thinking about it is that institutions create the rules which allow the investments to raise the productivity of organizations.
One is structural, about structural transformation, what it includes and what it doesn't include. Second is about the importance of industrial zones or industrial parks for effective governance. And third, I would like to go back to the old idea of import substituting industrialization, because I believe they still have a role to play. Now, on structural transformation and what it means. We all know that it is about changing the structure of the economy in terms of the relative shares of agriculture, industry, and services. That is okay. There is, however, a very important salient issue that is being glossed over in this rendition. And that is the importance of agricultural development.
We are talking about development. I'm not exactly sure how you define that, but you claim it is a function of developmental governance, which in turn is a function of institutions. So the question becomes, what development governance? I know you spent a huge amount of time yesterday discussing this particular issue. It is important that we identify appropriately, because otherwise we cannot talk about appropriate institution, can we?
So subsequently, several empirical studies have been done by asking different questions. For example, does aid work? Why foreign aid is provided? How much aid should be provided to developing countries? Does aid work in all developing countries in the same way? So to address these questions, many theoretical and empirical works have been done. However, these studies provide a controversial findings about the effect of aid. Some of the studies find that aid has a positive effect on growth of the recipient countries, and some of the studies, they find that aid has a negative effect on economic growth of the recipient countries, and some studies find insignificant effect of foreign aid on growth of the recipient countries.
First one is the notion of good policy. What exactly are we talking about here? If we were to go back to the 1980s, the experience in Africa particularly, which I think some of the issues that the paper seem to suggest, the 1980s actually saw the decimation of the education and health sectors in the name of, quote, good policies. And that, for me, kind of make the results very suspicious. And maybe have to be interpreted with a pinch of salt.
From the title is the economics and politics of foreign aid and domestic revenue mobilization. In the past, there have been worries that when donors give more aid to recipient countries, which leads to chronic aid dependence, they don't expend or they don't feel the need to expend any effort in collecting taxes from their constituencies. And the whole argument of my paper is trying to demonstrate that that's not necessarily the case. While raising taxes is unpopular in most developing countries, being chronically dependent on aid tends to be unpopular as well amongst the policymakers, because as I would explain soon, there are associated costs of political costs associated with aid and political costs associated with taxes. And the stakeholders in developing countries make their decisions kind of at the margin to evaluate the costs of taxes and the costs of aid and then see which source of finance is more appropriate to finance expenditures.